you want to keep Boris Johnson out. Are you in the mood for doing a deal, perhaps, with Jeremy Corbyn, if he's in a position to form a government but needs your help? And would a second independence referendum form the basis of that deal?
Well, good morning, Susanna, and good morning, Piers. We look forward to there being a hung parliament and to make sure that we can make Scotland's voice heard. And I'd simply say to Jeremy Corbyn or anybody else that don't pick up the phone to the Scottish National Party unless you're prepared to concede that there has to be a referendum on Scottish independence, and that has to happen in 2020. And Susanna, the reason that we're asking that is because we won an election in Scotland in 2016 to the Scottish Parliament with a manifesto commitment that in a change of circumstances like Brexit, that we need to make sure that the people of Scotland have got that right to choose.
Okay.
So we want that
well, that's
referendum.
interesting that you
and
say
of course
that.
We want
yes,
to
of
work
course.
with others.
Okay, so you said we believe the Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold another referendum if there is clear and sustained evidence that independence has become the preferred option of a majority of the Scottish people. Well, currently the polls don't show that. And secondly, or if there is a significant and material change in the circumstances, such as Scotland being taken out of the EU. But Jeremy Corbyn has pledged to hold a second referendum on whether we leave or remain. And if we then remain, why would you need a second referendum in Scotland?
Well, I think you've used a key phrase there, such as. It's not just about Brexit, and I think it is about the desire that people do have to make sure we can determine our own future. And, you know, when you look at polling... Yes, but we've already seen from the polls
that desire isn't there currently. You don't have a majority for independence.
I was just going to answer that for you. There was a poll in the Sunday Times that did demonstrate that not just people in Scotland, but people actually throughout the UK recognise the right of the people of Scotland to choose. And of course, when you ask the specific question as to whether Scotland would be better off with independence, again, a Sunday Times poll showed that 45% of those in Scotland in that poll thought Scotland would be better off independent in the EU, against only 35% thinking we'd be better off staying in the UK. So things are changing, Susanna, and it's about us providing the leadership in that debate. And we won that election in 2016. We've got that manifesto commitment. It's about making sure that the Scottish Parliament has the powers to enact that. And that power should lie with the Scottish Parliament and not with Westminster.
Let me ask, did you watch the Andrew Neil interview with Jeremy Corbyn last night?
I haven't. I've seen, obviously, the press headlines, Piers, but I didn't see the interview. I was at a football game last night. I had a night off from the campaign trail watching Hibs versus St Mirren, so I apologise for that.
Well, you may have missed one of the highlights or lowlights of the campaign
The question I was going to ask is on the basis of that interview. 4 times Jeremy Corbyn refused to apologise for the rampant anti-Semitism that has infested the Labour Party in the last few years under his tenure. What do you make of this furore that's erupted over Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party and anti-Semitism?
They have a problem with this, Piers. It's a very serious problem, and I would say to Jeremy that he really has to confront this properly. I mean, you've seen MPs that have been forced out of the Labour Party over the course of the while over this, and it's really a stain on society that we've got this, whether it's to do with what's happening in the Labour Party with anti-Semitism, any kind of abuse on any group in society based on ethnicity, based on religion or whatever, cannot be tolerated. And all of us in public life have got a responsibility to give leadership to that. And I think Jeremy has to do more. The Labour Party has to do more. I really feel for friends, colleagues in the Jewish movement that feel unease, and they've got to be reassured that living in Scotland, living in the United Kingdom, that this is their home, they're welcome here, and they should not be under any kind of pressure at any time. And there really has to be an unequivocal statement from all of us on that.
87% of British Jews believe that Jeremy Corbyn and his party are anti-Semitic. The chief rabbi yesterday came out and said he's unfit to be Prime Minister because of the anti-Semitism streak in him and his party. It does beg the question, if you share this view that this is such a serious matter, why on earth would you even contemplate
doing a deal,
getting into bed with the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn to do any kind of political deal over independence in Scotland? Surely the principal thing to do would be to say we are not going to do business with a party or a leader that is so contaminated by anti-Semitism.
As I said to you, I do think there is a problem that Labour Party have with anti-Semitism in the way that this has played out. And there has been that failure of leadership that they've shown. And I think they have to recognise that they have to reassure the Jewish community. And I actually don't believe, personally, I know John Bercow covered this in an interview a few days ago, that Jeremy is anti-Semitic, but he has failed to put this matter to bed. He's failed to reassure the Jewish community. I'd say to you, Piers, we're not looking to get into bed with anyone. What we're seeking to do is to make sure that Scotland's voice is heard. We're seeking to make sure that our right to have a referendum is respected by Westminster. We certainly won't be going into coalition with anyone,
but
we will work
your position
with
on
progressive
referendums
forces in Parliament to make sure our...
OK, your position on referendums is quite interesting, isn't it? Because you don't want to accept the result of the referendum on Brexit. You don't want to accept the result of the referendum on Scottish independence. Is there any result of any referendum that you would accept?
Well, look, let's take these two things. As far as the 2016 referendum is concerned, my job is to stand up for voters in Scotland, and Scotland voted very heavily to remain. 62%.
It doesn't matter. Scotland's part of the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. It doesn't matter that Scottish people may or may not have shared the general view. As long as you're part of the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union.
Well, here's the point. Piers, here is the point. In our referendum in 2014, we were told quite explicitly that if we stayed in the United Kingdom, then our rights as EU citizens, our rights to remain in the European Union would be respected. That was the central focus in many respects of the Better Together campaign. What we now find is that against our will, against our wishes, that we'll be taken out of the European Union, that we lose all the benefits, the free movement of people to live, to work, to get an education in Europe is to be taken away from us. And we're not prepared to...
It's just bigger the question, doesn't it? If you're so keen on better together, staying part of the Union, all one big happy family, why do you want to smash up the United Kingdom and go for independence? The very thing that Leave voters in the Brexit campaign wanted to do, the thing that you apparently abhor. How can you be so abhorred by what happened with Brexit and yet want the exact same thing for Scotland? I don't get it.
No. I think that's very pejorative language, if I may say so, but it's not about smashing up the UK. It's about making sure that we can remain friends with our nearest neighbours and partners in England and other parts of the United Kingdom. But the way that Europe works, it's a family of nations. There's respect shown across all the 28 EU member states. It is a rules-based organisation. It's very different from the way that the UK operates. And let me just give you a very small example of that.
Ian Blackford, you do more of your trade with the rest of the UK than you do with the EU. So actually breaking off from England and the rest of the UK is going to have a massive economic impact on Scotland, isn't it? And when you ask for your second... When you have your second referendum, what deal are you going to put to the Scottish people? Because we've already seen the problem about asking, leave or remain, but without a deal spelled out. Are you going to perhaps get a yes vote in Scottish independence referendum and then go and try and do a deal with the rest of the UK? You're going to put it back to the Scottish people when you've got that deal so that they can say, yes, that's exactly what they voted for? Because otherwise, aren't they going to be going into it blind, exactly as people are accusing us of going into the 2016 referendum?
Absolutely, unequivocally no. And if I can make the contrast, what we had was a slogan on the side of a bus. There was no plan for leaving the European Union. When we had our referendum in 2014, we had a 650-page white paper. It was very clear what we were asking people to vote for, and it was about the vision and the values that we wanted as an independent Scotland. But, in this matter of trade, the European single market is 8 times the size of the UK market. If I just give you the example of Ireland, if you go back to the 1940s, about 90% of Ireland's trade was with the rest of the UK. It's now 11% because they've very successfully diversified and grown a global economy. That's the opportunities that there are there for an independent Scotland, and of course we'll continue to trade as friendly neighbours with the rest of the United Kingdom. But on this issue of borders that Piers mentioned, no one's talking about a hard border in the island of Ireland. Why would anybody wanting to threaten that on the people of Scotland?
Well, hang on, I didn't actually mention borders, I was about to.
Well, you mentioned it earlier in the programme.
Yeah, but OK, so let's get to this issue of the border. The key problem with Brexit, according to the Remainers, has been this issue of a hard border in Ireland. What do you do if one part of Ireland is in the EU and one isn't? What do you do, right? And everyone agrees there has to be some kind of border somewhere. You seem to think that that's the case for Ireland, but a completely different kettle of fish if you were to be independent of Scotland. I mean, if you're going to have a separate entity as part of the EU as you want in Scotland, you've got to have a border with England. Where would that border go? How does it manifest itself? And how do you avoid a hard border? It's exactly the same conundrum that we have in Ireland, surely.
Well, first and foremost, of course, I think everyone respects the importance of delivering peace in Northern Ireland and the importance of the Good Friday Agreement. But let me say, Piers, that things have moved on over the course of the last while, and I don't think the UK government has probably understood the importance of technology changes that are there both on hardware and software that would allow for the movement of goods across border without having the infrastructure at the border. It exists.
So we wouldn't need a border, and that could also apply then to Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. It's technology that'll fix it.
Well, I do think there are technological advances which are there that we know about, that we know that people have spoken to the UK government about. They've certainly spoken to us. It can work. There are ways that this can be dealt with that negates the need for that infrastructure. This I accept is a very emotive subject, but I think we've actually got to look at the solutions to this rather than putting these barriers up which are not necessary in the modern world.
Let me ask you about nuclear weapons. Your stated position as a party is you want to get rid of the Trident nuclear defence system. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. We don't see these weapons as being effective in the modern world. It used to be the case when you were talking about the nuclear deterrent that the advantage that they had, I'd never agreed with nuclear weapons, was that they were undetectable in the oceans. That's no longer the case. And I think we've got to reflect on what are the modern requirements of an effective defence and security organisation. And I just simply think that these weapons of mass destruction play no part in that. We've got to take our responsibility seriously.
The reality is they exist, and they exist in very large numbers around the world. And the argument in favour of the nuclear deterrent is it has kept the peace. There's not been a nuclear weapon used in anger since the Second World War. It has demonstrably worked in maintaining a nuclear peace. If we were to unilaterally disarm ourselves, why would we not then put the country at greater risk?
Well, the UK, of course, is talking about renewing the Trident system at a cost of something up to 200 billion. I'd simply say that given the changing nature of our defence and security needs and the fact that these submarines can now be detected, they are not fit for purpose the way they were in the past. And we need to make sure that our armed forces are properly funded. And I think there is a crisis in terms of funding of the defence services. We have to take our responsibilities seriously. And quite frankly, we're looking at the wrong direction, the wrong end of the telescope, if I may say so, if we're talking about replacing Trident. Let's make sure we support our defence forces. We have a very good relationship with the defence forces in the SNP Westminster group through our defence team. But this is not the right way to look at a modern, efficient nation taking its responsibility seriously. We should be getting rid of these nuclear weapons.
Jeremy Corbyn last night was incapable of answering the question as to whether, if he received information that British forces had cornered the new leader of ISIS and could take him out, would he give the order to take him out? Would you approve that order immediately to take out and kill the new leader of ISIS if British forces were in the position to do so?
We face a real threat. The Western world faces a real threat from Daesh, and we need to make sure that we face it down. Of course, things have to be done through the rule of law, but it is absolutely important that ISIS are removed as a threat to the Western world, but we do that through.
So what would you do in that hypothetical question that Jeremy Corbyn was incapable of answering? What would you do? Would you give the order in that moment that the special forces have cornered the new leader of ISIS?
He's wearing a suicide vest.
He's heavily armed, and they have a position to take him out and kill him. Would you authorise them to do so?
As you know, Piers, there are rules of engagement, and of course, in extremis, if there's a situation that someone is a threat to life and cannot be taken into custody, then of course the military have got, under rules of engagement, the right to take action.
Okay.
So you would give the order for them to kill the head of ISIS in that situation?
Well, I've given you a nuanced position about the responsibilities.
I don't think there's much room for nuance, to be honest with you, in that situation. But this is the point, though, isn't it? There's not much time for nuance. When you're a leader... hang on, let me explain what I mean. I don't think there's much room or time for nuance in that scenario. You have to make an immediate judgment call. And if the armed forces, if the head of the armed forces says to you, we can take out this guy right now, you have literally seconds to make that decision. There's no time or room for nuance.
No, I understand that, and I used to serve on the ISC, the Security Committee of Parliament, so I'm aware of all the obligations that the security services have. The preference would be to take that individual into custody. If that can't be done, there are rules of operation, and I'll always support the security services.
OK, so you would give the order to kill?
Well, I gave you the answer I did. I think you can make your own judgment on what I've said, but I'll back the security services.
Why are you afraid of saying you give the order to kill?
Acting under the rules of engagement that they have. What I've said is that there are rules of engagement, and I will support the security services in carrying out their duties. I think that's a fairly clear answer, actually.
Well,
but there we are.
The answer is quite straightforward. Would you give the order to kill him or not? It's yes or no, isn't it?
Well, Piers, I think I've answered the question. To be brutally honest.
Well, to be brutally honest, that's exactly what you haven't done. You've talked about nuance and about rules of engagement and everything else. What you haven't done is, if it actually came to it and it was lawful to do so, would you give the order to kill?
Well, that's the key point. If things are lawful and if there is no other legitimate alternative to that, then of course these are things that take place. And we saw that with the previous leader of Daesh in the US over the course of the last few weeks, and that is something that I would support.
OK, we got there in the end.